overgrown trash can!
Jubilee is well known for her bubbly and joyful personality, representing everything good about being an X-Man. However, did you know that there was a time in her life when she went down a dark path and came close to annihilating the entire race of mutants? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video, so grab a wooden stake as we take you through the darkest pages of Jubilee's history and explain the untold story of her vampiric times. But before we get started with the video, we have a small request for you. If you like our content, subscribe to us and like this video. It might just be a simple click for you, but it means a lot to us. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get started. How did Jubilee become a vampire? After being introduced in the Uncanny X-Men issue number 244, Jubilee has always been a significant member of the team, representing the joyful side of being an X-Man. However, her story takes a dark turn when she transforms into a vampire, falling prey to the evil schemes of Xarus, the son of Dracula. During that time, Jubilee lost her mutant power due to Wanda's decimation spell, and distanced herself from the X-Men, as she did not want to be a liability to the team. Meanwhile, the X-Men had set up their base of operation in Utopia, an island on the coast of San Francisco. So, to meet her friend Pixie, Jubilee goes to San Francisco, but while having brunch with her, a strange man dressed in black comes near them and explodes, coating Jubilee in his blood. Jubilee was shaken to the core as she was unable to comprehend what just happened to her. In the aftermath of the blast, Pixie quickly escorted Jubilee to the X-Men headquarters to get her tested. It took some time for Cyclops and Logan to connect the dots and deduce that the suicide bomber was actually a vampire and had infected Jubilee with his vampiric blood. Soon, San Francisco started swarming with vampires, and Jubilee also started to show signs of her transformation into one. Dr. Nemesis explains that despite Jubilee's body's natural resistance, the vampiric virus is slowly evolving, and soon she will be consumed with the desire for blood. This was not good news for the X-Men, so they quickly started searching for a way to defuse the vampiric situation. Around the same time, while chasing after a vampire, Wolverine meets Blade, who reveals that Dracula is no longer in the picture and his son Xarus is leading the vampires against the mutants. Moreover, Xarus has somehow manufactured an amulet capable of diverting the harmful rays of the sun, allowing his undead army to roam freely in daylight. Meanwhile, in Utopia, Dr. Nemesis runs some tests on Jubilee and learns that she's getting some kind of telepathic call from someone. There's something she wants, and although she's afraid of going after it, she just can't stop herself. When Nemesis asks her to fight these urges, she coldly claims that she doesn't want to. So before leaving for a meeting with the X-Men, Nemesis leaves Kavita Rao in charge of keeping an eye on Jubilee, and notifying him if she goes through any significant change. Meanwhile, Xarus gets his subordinates in his lair, and learns that the vampiric virus they created is working perfectly. Although their target Jubilee is still fighting the infection, she will soon fall and come searching for him. Here, we learn that Xarus' ultimate target was not Jubilee. He infected her because he knew that Wolverine would come rushing to save her. And after Wolverine is transformed into a vampire, it's game over for the X-Men. Soon, Xarus' words came true, and Jubilee escaped her confinement in Utopia and rushed to San Francisco. She knows she shouldn't do this, but somehow, she's strangely pulled by a hypnotic suggestion. After a long travel, she arrives in an abandoned building and knows that she shouldn't be here. However, there was something inside of her that knew that this was the right place, and she was unable to stop herself. Inside the building, she's greeted by Xarus, who reveals that he has been waiting for her. He reveals that although Jubilee doesn't know him, he can help her get answers and release her from her pain. Soon, he proceeds to bite Jubilee, making her a full-fledged vampire. Just as predicted by Xarus, when Wolverine learns about Jubilee's disappearance, he launches a full-blown, brutal assault on the vampires to find any information he can about her. Meanwhile, inside Xarus' lair, Jubilee, who is now turned completely evil, is tasked with turning Wolverine into a vampire. Though they're unsure if his healing factor will prove a hindrance to his transformation, they definitely want Logan amongst their ranks. Thus, Jubilee agrees to their request, claiming that no one knows Wolverine better than she does. Soon, after brutally massacring vampire after vampire, Wolverine finally gets close to Jubilee's confinement place. However, he was unable to smell her scent, as this place was crawling with vampires. After killing all the vampires, Logan arrives in Xarus' lair, where he finds Jubilee tied upside down, so he untangles her to ensure her safety. However, Jubilee pretends to be normal, and after finding an opening, she bites Wolverine, transforming him into a vampire. Meanwhile, the X-Men resurrected Dracula in an attempt to pit him against Xarus for his betrayal, and neutralize the looming threat of vampires in San Francisco. Soon after, Cyclops contacts Xarus to question why he set his vampires free in their lair. Thus, Xarus explains that both vampires and mutants are hated and hunted by humans, so they should team up and eradicate humanity from the face of the earth. However, Cyclops shows his disinterest in this mindless violence, and asks them to flee or face his wrath. So to convince Cyclops, Xarus introduces the newly transformed Wolverine and Jubilee, who explain the transformative feeling of being a vampire. However, they fail to impress Cyclops, who remains adamant about his decision. Thus, Wolverine announces that Scott made the wrong decision and the vampires are coming for him. Later, Xarus launches a 3-frontal attack on the X-Men, with vampires attacking the mutants on land, air, and water. To watch the destruction of the X-Men, Jubilee joins Xarus and witnesses the live massacre of mutants. However, Cyclops only allows the mutants with skin-hardening abilities to fight alongside him, quickly overwhelming the vampiric forces. But the tide of battle soon shifts toward the vampires when Logan arrives on the battlefield to seek Scott's head. However, Scott was already prepared for this. He predicted the possibility of Wolverine turning into a vampire and made Dr. Nemesis inject him with nanobots that could easily shut down his healing factor. With the remote he has right now, Cyclops switches on Logan's healing factor, curing him of his vampirism. After being cured of vampirism, Logan turns on Xarus and launches a fierce counterattack on his undead army. Xarus is frustrated with his failure and asks his subordinates to launch a second wave on the X-Men. However, at that very moment, Dracula comes to the site to punish his son for his betrayal. Xarus orders his army to take care of his father, but no one dares touch the mighty lord of vampires. Thus, Jubilee hands Xarus his sword and he takes on his father all alone. Meanwhile, the X-Men arrive on the site and take down every other vampire there. Soon, Xarus is beheaded by Dracula, enraging Jubilee, who has formed a connection with the vampire lord's son. When Jubilee tries to confront the vampire lord, he shuts her down with just a slap. After proving his dominance and becoming the lord of vampires once again, Dracula vacates the premises, leaving Jubilee in the care of the X-Men. Jubilee was taken by the X-Men to Utopia and kept inside a facility. Although the mutants did not have a cure for her at the moment, they were hopeful that Jubilee was somewhere around there and would find her way back to them. Following her transformation into a vampire, Jubilee received guidance from Wolverine and started learning how to control her vampiric instincts. When X-23, haunted by her past, arrives in Paris, Wolverine, Gambit, and Jubilee team up to help X-23 find solace. However, the journey was not smooth, as they had to encounter many setbacks while Jubilee struggled due to her vampire physiology. Later, during an X-Men mission in Europe, Jubilee meets a vampire legend named Raizo Kodo, who has somehow found a way to defy the predatory methods of vampires and is also able to walk in the sun. She was enlisted by Raizo into his vampire group, called the Forgiven, to learn and control her vampirism. Since all this time Jubilee was dependent on Wolverine's blood and his healing factor to fight off her vampirism, she struggled to control her instincts and desire for human blood. Although she was faced with countless challenges, she emerged victorious, learning to control her vampiric powers and use them for good. Afterward, during the events of the Avengers vs. X-Men, Jubilee fought Black Widow, preventing the Avengers from taking Hope Summers into their custody. As she became a young adult, she adopted an abandoned human child and named him Shogo. To take care of the child, she journeyed back to the Jean Grey School, where she reunites with her former mutant friends. Later down the line, recognizing her leadership potential, she was also appointed as a field leader and battled the vicious Sentinels on Santa Catalina Island. How did she recover? After Kitty Pryde became the head mistress of the Jean Grey School for Mutants, Jubilee, who had grown into adulthood, decided to become a mentor in the school and train the next generation of mutants. However, since Shogo was also growing up, dealing with bratty teenagers and handling the duty of being a mother was too much for her, so her former teammate, Jono Starsmore, came to her rescue and started helping her with her chores. Later down the line, the New Mutants were attacked by Monet, who was also a former teammate of Jubilee and Starsmore. To protect her students, Jubilee chases away Monet, but the best part about this chaos is that it brings Jubilee and Jono closer, and they start dating. However, her peaceful existence comes to an abrupt halt when Monet returns, unsyncing the school from the outside world and terrorizing the students. But Jubilee makes her way back to the school and asks Monet to settle their score without involving the kids. However, Monet is not the kind of person to play fair and square, so she steals Jubilee's light-bending amulet and throws her outside to burn like a vampire. Watching Jubilee in pain, her student, Kid Omega, uses up the remnants of Phoenix power inside of him and cures her vampirism. Consequently, this also restored Jubilee's mutant powers, and with her newfound powers, Jubilee detaches Monet from her brother's control, who was the reason behind Monet turning dark. With her vampirism finally gone, Jubilee settles into her new life with a newfound resolve to nurture Shogo and a new team of mutant misfits. Marvelous verdict. Jubilee's transformation into a vicious vampire was both unexpected and surprisingly good. However, there were a few discrepancies in her portrayal. During the X-Men vs. Vampire storyline, she was given the features of a young adult, and during later storylines, her design was revised, portraying her as a bubbly little girl. This significant change in her character design also sparked many controversies around her, which kind of increased the popularity of her comics. However, to be honest, the story was pretty mid. They set up Xarus to be the next big thing and annihilated his character without even giving him a proper fight. Thus, we can say the idea of turning Jubilee into a vampire was a good one, but the execution of the story falls flat on the surface. With that being said, if you like our content, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone!